are, I don't know how many people are in your conference room, so hello to everybody. So I started in this industry about 13, 14 years ago, and I was working a traditional real estate profession. I was working with lots of different buyers and sellers, and I was recognizing
No,
that.
I'm listening to Zoom.
Guys, if you could mute yourself, sorry about that, Cliff. If we could just all stay on mute, I just muted everybody, but please don't unmute yourself. Go ahead. Sorry.
So I started and I was working traditional buyer sellers, knocking on doors, cold calling people, and I enjoyed that very much because I'm a listing heavy individual. I prefer to have more listings than buyers. Back in 2008, 2009, where there was a good amount of foreclosures and short sales on the market, I started working with some small local banks in my community, and I also started working with short sales. Now that was back in the day where short sales were kind of new to the industry. For people who've been in the business for a little bit now, realize that probably in 2001 or in 1997, there really weren't many short sale opportunities out there. And back in 07, 08, the lenders were really starting their process by which they could center around helping liquidate these properties before they go into foreclosure, because no matter what anybody says, lenders do not want to take properties into foreclosure. So what ends up happening is what I ended up doing then at that point was working on the short sale routes. Now that opens up a tremendous opportunity for lots of different real estate agents in this market. Short sales are going to come before foreclosures. However, there are foreclosures that are going to hit the market. The market, and I can get into some market details and my predictions on the market based on what my clients are telling me. Short sales are going to start first, and it's very important that we present ourselves and prepare ourselves for a short sale foreclosure surge. When I say surge, I mean surge. I don't mean influx. I mean surge. A lot of people are predicting with the market changing and the market bottoming out that there's going to be all these foreclosures on the market, all these short sales on the market. That's just not going to be the case. So let me just make sure that everybody is aware of that. So I started doing the short sales after I started doing about 4 years of doing BPOs for banks. Then I finally had the resume to have the conversation with some of these banks that saying I can represent you in your foreclosure side of things. Let me just make one thing clear. If anybody thinks that being an REO real estate agent, which is what I do and my team focuses on, is all this hunky-dory happy stuff, it is absolutely the most challenging aspect of doing real estate. I don't care what anybody says. I've got at any given time at least $250,000 out that I'm waiting on reimbursements for. It isn't something that, the days are over where you put a house on the market for sale and then put it on a lockbox and wait for the phone to ring. That's not what these banks do. As many of you see with my inventory, if you see it, the banks repair most of their inventory. The banks repair most of their properties. So the days are over where we have a foreclosure, we put it on a lockbox, boom, it's over, phone rings, it's done. That isn't the case. So it's a very interesting, challenging, it's a consuming part of my life. Fortunately, I got a really large team that is able to help me get through a lot of this stuff. So hopefully that answered your question.
Okay, so we have a very eclectic group on here. Everyone from they just got into real estate to been in real estate 20 plus years. We throw a bunch of terms around. Can you break it down, kind of like the process, just so that we can have deeper conversations? The REO, short sale, foreclosure, BPO versus CMA, HUD. Can you explain these just a little bit so that we can dig deeper?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So REO means real estate owned. It's owned by a financial institution, non-individual, non-business. Could be corporate owned. REO could be owned by your local bank, Mechanics Bank or Bay Coast Bank or Bank 5, to a hedge fund acquiring the property through these different organizations. So that's what REO means. It's real estate owned. It's owned by a lender or a financial institution. A short sale means, and it's a great opportunity, which I'd like to get into more details on for people who are here, to really go after short sale listings because they're public, they're made available. But short sale means that they're the soldiers in relief, which is about 45 to 60 days away from a foreclosure sale. They get, and it's recorded at the Registry of Deeds, a notice that the bank is going to begin or finish the foreclosure process. Now, before they get what they call a Soldiers in Relief Act, that tells you you're about 45 days, which means if you're serving in the military, a bank cannot foreclose on your property because you are serving in the military. If you are not serving in the military, obviously you're exempt. They're going to continue the foreclosure sale. But that is all open. You can go to Realty Track, you can go to any real estate website that allows you to go and say, hey, this property's in foreclosure, and what you could do is go out and actually knock on their door or call them and ask them if they want to sell their house, because the bank's going to end up taking it. And in some cases, not all cases, there's still a sizable amount of equity in their homes. So that's what a short sale means. When you have a property with HUD, H-U-D, it's owned by Housing and Urban Development. You've noticed they're a client of mine. There's not a lot of inventory there. They've been selling a lot of their non-performing loans, which is their mortgage. So keep in mind, if you have a house, you have a mortgage on your property, and you go to your local mortgage broker, you go to Movement Mortgage, what's going to end up happening is Movement Mortgage is going to end up taking that mortgage, and they're going to end up selling that to somebody else. So it's going to be sold to somebody in the bank in Texas or California or Florida or one of those places, and they're going to assume your property. So what happens is they buy the reperforming loan from your mortgage company. However, when you default and stop making your mortgage payments, they sell that paper as well. So that's why the days of Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and HUD having all this listing inventory are over. That's why you see lots of different other banks assuming their paper. And in terms of a difference between a CMA versus a REO foreclosure is it's really looking at a strategy. So traditionally, you're used to going to knock on, speak to somebody's house, a buyer and a seller, and they end up telling you, hey, listen, I want to sell my house, and you give them a CMA. The work that we do on our end, on my team, is much more far sophisticated than that. We have to pretty much do an appraisal in order for us to determine a fair market value. So I hope I answered any of those questions. I don't think I missed any of my usual lingo that I usually use.
No, that was good. That was good. And when you were talking about that in terms of like offer CMA, then we have the BPO as well. So if we start to, now that we have like the basics, for the real estate industry, you said that you've built relationships, and obviously one of the questions in the chat, hopefully will answer this. It said, what is your conversation with local banks? With that said, when you're getting into a relationship with banks, maybe CPAs, attorneys, and other resources, where do you find your resources to gain these opportunities, and what conversations are you having?
So that's a very difficult question to answer. So work with me for a moment. It isn't a matter of me just picking up a phone and calling a bank and saying, hi, this is Cliff, I'd like to sell your REO foreclosed properties. That's not how it works. What happens is you need to have years of experience with doing BPOs, and doing BPOs for $50 or $75 for a lot of these banks is what the first thing you need to do. And then what ends up happening.
And just to be clear, sorry, Cliff. So for those of you who don't know, you're basically doing a CMA. So if we're talking residential for a minute, you're doing it like a free CMA. They're asking you to do a BPO, which is kind of like a CMA, to see the value of the property. And you're doing it for cheap money, and you are not guaranteed that you are the list agent or will be involved in the transaction, correct?
Correct. Well, you're not going to be. So there's going to be, so what happens is if I have a foreclosure listing and somebody does they call it third-party BPO, you're doing the BPO because I do a BPO, and they're going to see both of our values to determine the listing price or the strategy, whether they're going to sell it as is or repair it. But getting back to your question, I'll tell you that it's going to take years of you doing BPOs for BPO companies before they're going to welcome you into their network. So you're going to have to do good work for a good 5 or 6 years. And then what happens is you're going to start getting phone calls, possibly, if you're really, really good at showing good quality work, doing adjustments, which is if anybody ever looks at an appraisal, you'll see adjustments, minus and pluses on the side of your CMA or your BPO, and then you're going to get going. Now, if anybody's looking to start out in REOs, I'll be honest, it's a challenge. If it was me and it was today, I would be starting, and all the bumps along the way, I would be starting at working on short sales first, because there's plenty of those to go around. And then what happens is when you start speaking to these lenders for the short sales, then you're going to end up speaking to the same people who handle the foreclosures. I will say though, and again, I'm an honest guy, I'm just going to be candid. I don't want people to think we're going to jump on this call and everybody's going to get all these foreclosure listings, because unfortunately it doesn't work that way. A lot of these lenders are very, very loyal to their broker networks. Okay, so because let's say I work for Bank of America. If Jameson calls Bank of America today and says, "Hey, Bank of America, I'd like to sell your foreclosures," they're not going to talk to you, right? Because you don't have a resume, you're calling the wrong people, and you need to have years worth of experience on the BPO side before they'll even give you an opportunity. And then the next question is, do you got a couple $100,000 laying around where you could pay for trash outs, pay for repairs, pay for maid services and lawn care and all those other things? So to circle back to the original point, the conversation is with a local lender is much easier than the larger lenders. So if you're in the Bank of Andover, right, if there is one,
Yep.
You can call the local collections department at the Bank of Andover and say, "I noticed that this property is coming up for foreclosure. Do you have an agent that you have to liquidate their property?" And in most cases, they do not with the local banks. Now, fortunately, in our area, I've established relationships with all of the local banks here in my market. So anybody calls are going to say, "Yeah, we usually give them to Cliff." But if you're in a market that's untapped in the Andover world, or wherever people are on this call, there's an opportunity for people to reach out to their local banks. And the conversation is, "I would like to help you liquidate this property. If you need help, I have the experience, the financial means to make sure this happens, and I've got contractors and crews available to help you liquidate this without incurring a larger loss."
Excellent. So Cliff, so let's say that they exhaust those conversations with either the lenders that they know, or they purposely start going to banks and creating relationships with lenders, maybe even attorneys, maybe even CPAs. You mentioned that at the Registry of Deeds that they need to record the Relief Act if they're going to serve this, correct? So
Right.
Is that a good resource as well as to try to figure out? It's kind of like, when people are going through a divorce, which we're going to be talking to Mitchell Weissman's expertise later, but when it's registered, then you can softly and creatively target that property. So is that something that you would promote? Have you done it? And if not with those two, how would you market, or where do you find your lists to market those that you don't have to have a relationship with the bank yet, but you're trying to get them to directly to do that?
Okay, so you can go to Realty Track or foreclosure websites, and you can look for pre-foreclosures. And when you see pre-foreclosures, it's going to give you the property address and the name of the borrower or the owner of the property. And all you have to do is go after them, you would go after any other listings. Like you'd go after a for sale by owner or an expired listing. You would say, "Hi, my name is Cliff. I noticed that the bank," it's a tough conversation, right? "I noticed the bank has started a foreclosure proceeding on your property. If you're interested, I think there's some equity. We could probably cancel the foreclosure sale. I have a good attorney," you could say, hopefully you do, "that is able to help you negotiate the short sale, and maybe we can cancel this upcoming auction." You're there to help them. That's certainly an opportunity. If you don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation, because it is uncomfortable, is you just tell them, are you interested in selling? Ask them, are you interested in selling your property? And they might say no to you because a lot of these folks, especially in this industry right now, with all of the programs available, their heads are in the sand. So a lot of the files that we get, if they're into foreclosure now and they didn't leverage the opportunity to go after a lot of these folks and get free money, which has been available for 2 years, they're really going to be tough foreclosures, and they really have no interest in talking to you. They're going to eventually end up either filing bankruptcy, which extends their foreclosure period and their time in their property for another 6 to 8 months, or they would end up moving forward and just doing something else, just leaving the house.
Now, we do have a question in terms of like attorneys. So do you specifically have attorneys that consult with sellers before you list the short sale?
I don't, generally speaking. I mean, there's different attorneys that focus on short sale work and litigation, but I don't per se. I don't. My team doesn't really. We have a couple of different attorneys that work with us on our team. But I think once you get the short sale, you can just speak to any of the attorneys that your office does business with, and I'm sure they'd have no problem with helping your seller negotiate a short sale. And I'll be honest, back in 2007, 2008, it was much more challenging to get a foreclosure short sale completed, because if you ever did this before, you would send a packet to a bank, and fax it to them, and they never get it. So you have to fax it to them again, and then you fax it, keep faxing it, and then all of a sudden they never got it. You got to start all over again. So those days are over. They have systems in place now and portals that they say, hey, go log into this portal and update the hardship letter of the occupant or the owner of the property, and send me the offer. And they've improved the process tremendously.
So thank you for mentioning that, because I was sliding into the hardship letter, and I'd like to divide it into sellers and buyers for a few minutes. Okay, so when you're potentially listing a property of this category and caliber, what do we need to know that maybe as a residential agent, it's a little bit more? What information could you give that wouldn't be as traditional as your typical residential transaction?
Can you ask that again? I might have missed something. I'm sorry.
Sure. So when we're listing a property, a short sale,
yep,
what things should the agents know if they've never done this before? What are some tips and tricks and information that you need to know that's not just as typical, besides your residential listing that doesn't involve bank and short sale? What do we need to know?
So you need to first off disclose in the MLS that the property is subject to third-party approval, which means it is subject to the bank approving the short sale. So you could list the property for whatever you want, but at the end of the day, if the bank won't reduce the amount owed to them, you're not having a short sale, therefore you're not having a closing. So for example, if there's a mortgage on a property for $350, but the house is only worth $250, therefore you need to have the bank accept a loss of $100,000. And they're going to do their own metrics and calculations inside as to whether or not they want to make sure that that happens. But it's going to be indicative on us as brokers and agents to make sure that we market the property for what it's worth. So if the house is really worth $300, but you list it for $250, but they owe $350, you're going to have a hard time getting the bank to approve it, because they're going to order local BPOs from local real estate brokers, and they're going to look at what the property is worth to them. And they've already ordered one, especially if they've already started the foreclosure process or before they acquired the loan. So they already have an internal number of what it's worth. So you're going to need to disclose that it's subject to the third-party approval. So that's important. The other thing that's important is the type of sellers that you're working with aren't the most happiest people in the world. They don't have a place to go. They have nowhere to go. They can't rent. Their credit's screwed. They're in a tough spot. You're going to really have to be a guidance counselor as well with a lot of these folks as well, because they've run on tough times and hard times, and they also need to, they're going to need your help. So ultimately, you might sell that house but they have nowhere to go. So you're going to also have to help relocate them as well. So it's not the day that they're going to sell their house and then you're going to go help them buy another one, because they can't buy another one. You might have to have them go look at a rental, which I know a lot of people don't like to do. So that's the big thing. And the other thing to keep in mind is short sales take a long time to get approved. You need to make sure that there's a understanding that you're looking at least 60 to 90 days before a lender will approve your short sale, because they have to go through different credit committees within the bank. They have to look at the HUD, make sure that there's not all these fees on the HUD. They need to approve the HUD, they need to send a short sale letter, and they need to order new values, which include an interior BPO, which in most cases, broker price opinion, which is a CMA, in most cases, the owners of the property won't even cooperate and let them in. So that delays things. So you just got to look at it that you're looking at least a 5 to 6 to 8 month process to get a short sale approved.
So, all right, so remember that for a moment, because that's on the buy side. So we're going to talk about how to protect your buyers and how to set expectations for the buyers on the pros and cons of buying this type of property. But over on the list side, you mentioned, so typically as a residential real estate agent, you're dealing directly with the sellers for all this information. When you're doing a short sale, you obviously have a third party involved. So do you have somebody that's assigned to the property and you're going through them who's going through the seller, or are you, the agent, going through the seller's going through the bank and coming back?
So what happens is, for that situation, the sellers would ultimately give the listing agent a third-party authorization, which would allow them to speak on their behalf. So you get a third-party authorization. The seller would say, I hereby allow Jamison Souza to speak on my behalf with this attached loan number for this property. He has all the rights to do so. So you would be leading the charge. If you rely on your sellers to do it, it's never going to get done. So you're going to need to make sure that your office has a third-party authorization form. You get the third-party authorization form, and you get talking to them, and you call them and you say to them, hi, I'm Cliff, I'm representing so-and-so. They're listing their property as a short sale. What forms do you need from me to streamline this process? Just know that you're speaking to an operator and you're going to get a different answer if you call somebody else. That's the challenge. So the reason I went down the buyer route is because it's all kind of inclusive a little bit, because you need to make sure that everybody's fully aware, especially the sellers, that this is a process. And in the meantime, in that process, it's a very strong possibility that you could list a property as a short sale, and then the bank's going to take the property and foreclose on it anyway. They're not going to stop the foreclosure because you, as a real estate agent, listed the property as a short sale. They're never going to do that.
And so just so everyone's clear here in the training room and on Zoom, I'm breaking this down to like very basic information for some of you. And for many of you, it's redundant information, because I want you to understand that. If you've never taken any of these properties and you don't involve that third party, from my personal experience, Cliff is right. The seller obviously is not going to be so happy and engaging to work with you because mentally they're not even in the right place. So when we talk about, all right, sorry, let me mute Daisy. Thank you. So when we talk about the buy side, Cliff, right? So when people are representing the buyers and they're creating forms and stuff, can you talk about the dates and any contingency language, what looks good, what holds a bank from denying it? Can you give some information about that from the on the buyer side?
Yeah, and if I may, I'd like to take this opportunity to help you guys strengthen your offers for the foreclosures as well. So I'm gonna get into that as well while we're talking about offers. So first thing is short sales. So if you're going to be presenting an offer as a buyer's agent for a short sale, you need to acknowledge and educate your buyers that this is going to be a process. You don't expect don't start calling the movers. Don't do any of that other stuff like that. That you're going to have a good couple months, unless you got a local bank that's ready to rock here. It's not going to be something that's going to be that easy to do. and you got to educate them, which means you also have to educate your mortgage broker as well about rate lock extensions. Don't be crying because your rate increased in 3 months. You got to expect a 6-month window where you're probably going to close, and then you take a chance that in that 6 months the bank forecloses on the property and you're out of luck. Okay, so that's something to keep in mind. So timelines on short sales are very important. I wouldn't be putting a large deposit down because nobody really cares. The banks don't look at large deposits when it comes to short sales. They just look at the offer, the terms, and of course, it can't be subject to somebody selling their house because they're not going to delay a short sale for a buyer who might want to buy a house because somebody has a house to sell. So those are just some takeaways. You could still have a home inspection. It's still subject to financing. It's still subject to an appraisal. It's still subject to everything other than that. But by the time the offer gets to the bank, all that stuff needs to be done. So you are educating your buyer that they are possibly doing a home inspection on a property that they're not going to end up buying because of circumstances that are beyond their control. Okay, so there's a lot there. So let me
Now,
tell you.
Cliff, is there a timeline that the property needs to stay on the market, like 10 days before the seller or the third party accept the offer?
That's for foreclosures. So I can get into that now if you'd like, but usually what happens is if a foreclosure is listed on the market, most banks like to make sure that the property is listed for at least 2 full weekends, 1 full weekend, or 10 days. Okay. In some cases, banks like to make sure that they give owner occupants an opportunity to purchase the property before an investor comes in and steals the property away with cash. So you'll see, if you look at a lot of my listings, there's the possibility that some properties say the house needs to be listed on the MLS for 21 days before they would accept an investor offer. The reason for that is their mortgage is probably backed by Fannie, Freddie, or HUD, which their whole mission is to make sure they restore and revitalize neighborhoods. So they want to make sure that owner occupants are given that opportunity first before an investor comes in with an all-cash offer and wipes out all these buyers, even if they're going to live there. Okay, so that's a big thing to keep in mind. One thing I want to stress with everybody, whether you deal with me or you deal with another real estate broker that handles foreclosures, your offers, advice to you, if you take anything away from this, whether you're new, experienced, seasoned, just got in, doesn't matter. You need to present good, strong offers to lenders because it makes a huge difference. What are they looking for? They're looking for a strong deposit. Very important. I'm not talking about $1,000 and this whole, like, especially up towards Boston, they like to do this thing where you sign a contract, you accept the offer, then you do a home inspection, then you sign a contract. You have to sign a P&S within 24 hours. The attorneys aren't going to look at it. They can look at it all they want. They're not going to make any changes to it. They're not going to cross out bank addendums. They're not going to circle things. You're wasting your time, right? I'm just being candid. They're not going to look at it. They're not going to change it. They'll kill the deal first. They've had high quality attorneys prepare their REO foreclosure addendums, and you sign it or you don't buy the house. That's really what it comes down to. Okay. But with your offers, you want to have a strong deposit with your purchase and sales agreement. And a strong deposit doesn't mean $1,000, doesn't mean $2,000. I'm talking something over $5,000 to $10,000. Okay. And you have to also make sure that if you can do without a home inspection, your offer will appear stronger to a lender. Okay. Because a lot of people, especially now, like to lock a property and have a home inspection and then say, I want $10,000 off. You're not going to beat the banks up in most cases for a reduction. So if you can do without a home inspection or waive the home inspection contingency and still help your buyers conduct a home inspection so they know what they're getting into, that is something I would suggest you do. The other thing is, don't make an offer subject to you selling your property. 95% of the time, a lender is not going to go under contract with you if your buyer has a house that they need to sell. There's a very 5% possibility that they would consider your house if you have it under contract already and there's no contingencies. meaning it's not subject to them selling the house, but maybe it's subject to you getting the funds, okay? And the other thing to keep in mind on the offer side of things is they will not entertain escalation clauses. So you should be submitting under a highest and best situation, your buyer's highest and best. All the lenders, and I work with all of them, do not allow escalation clauses. So when you see it, because what happens is if anybody has ever put a offer in on a foreclosure, we have these portals like propoffers.com, okay? And if anybody has ever submitted an REO offer before, you go to the website and what happens is these lenders look at it, they're not necessarily clicking your documents, they're looking at your terms and they're clicking a button. And if your offer form says subject to them selling their house, but you didn't write it in the form, it's going to be missed, okay? So if you have the other thing is with the offers, whatever is documented on your offer form needs to be articulated in the offer submission site that you use, because in more cases than not, unfortunately, these lenders are not looking at what your offer says. They're just looking at the website because they're very, very busy.
Okay. We do have a question about when you make an offer on an REO property, does checking investors versus a personal home make a difference on the offer?
In some cases, yes, especially if it says it in the MLS that the property is a first look property. So if in the MLS it says that, within the first 21 days, or even if it's after the first 21 days, yes, your offer is stronger as an owner occupant. However, words of advice, if you are putting an offer in as an investor, really deep down inside it's an investor, but you're clicking an owner occupant, you will end up getting in trouble because you are going to sign an affidavit with your purchase and sales agreement that says the buyer and the seller and this listing agent and the buyer's agent all acknowledge that the buyer is going to occupy the property for at least 1 year. And if HUD gets involved, they will do an investigation and they could suspend, file a complaint with the licensing board that you misrepresented the fact that you're representing a buyer who is an investor who was locking in this as an owner occupant. So just want you guys to be aware of that. But yes, your offer is stronger, especially if it's within that window of it being first listed.
We have a question here in the training room.
So I had heard that recently, within the last.
Can you hear her, Cliff?
Vaguely, yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you come up if you have a question, just because it will be easier on here. Plus, this is recorded for those who couldn't attend. So there you go.
Hi, Cliff. I'm Vivian.
Hi, nice to meet you.
You're bringing back memories for me from when I first started in real estate in 2005 and things went down. So it's really great to have the refresher on some of the things that you're offering. But I had heard recently that banks over the last 2 or 3 years have been collateralizing properties. So they put them together in a package like 10 houses and they go to investors and say, hey, do you want to buy these 10 houses? Do you know if they're still doing that? Because that really, kind of doesn't create competition for those for people looking to buy them. Most people can't buy 10 houses at a time, even, investors or people looking to rehab properties. So what is the trend on that? Are you seeing them still collateralizing?
No, what they're doing is they're doing that a little differently. What they're doing is they're selling the paper, the mortgage, to other investors. So no, so like if I had a client, if I had a guaranteed rate and they were one of my clients and they foreclosed on 15 properties, they're not going to call Cliff up, the investor, and say, Cliff, you want to buy these for 50 cents on the dollar after they've already taken it to foreclosure. What they usually do is they sell the non-performing loan, the paper, the mortgage, to other investors who are billion-dollar funds that other local investors aren't competing with. So they are not selling out, like you might get like a little local financial institution who might do that, right? But you're not going to get a large mom and pop shop here that is going to say, here's 10 properties, have a good day. They're kind of doing that beforehand.
Great, all right, thank you for your answer.
I have a question too.
Okay, so if you have a question, just come up. Okay, go ahead.
Does he negotiate his own short sales?
Do you negotiate your own short sales?
I have in the past. I find it to have more control. If you have an admin on your team, I would encourage your admin or somebody who's on your team to help you with that. Because you're busy, you can't be focused on doing that stuff as real estate agents. So the answer to your question is I have in the past. If I would do it today, I would probably have one of the members on my staff lead that charge.
Does he have a third party doing it?
So assuming, do you have a third party doing that for you?
Yeah, it would be me. I'm the third party. I would be the third party authorization, because what happens is if you hire an attorney to do it, they're too busy. They're not going to give you the necessary attention to get your deal done. You need to take control or have one of your administrative people on your team, staff, or office help you facilitate that short sale. If you're on a team or you have an admin in your office, that's fantastic. Have them do it. If you don't, then do it yourself. Once a week on Fridays, call and get an update if you can.
Do you think that right now in this market that we are in today, do you think that there is an advantage for some of these buyers to engage in purchasing the short sales? Do you think there's value?
I
or do you
think
think it's too
so,
high?
yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think I do. I think there's an option because so I believe that the only sellable inventory in the foreseeable future is going to be foreclosures and short sales. Because people aren't selling their houses right now. If they didn't sell it last year, they're probably not going to put it up this year because the market's already slowing down. So I think the only sellable inventory, or not only, mostly the only sellable inventory is going to be foreclosures. That's why a lot of these banks are repairing their properties today. So I would encourage you to, yes, submit an offer for a short sale, of course, because that's what your buyers want you to do. It's just going to be super important that you educate them on the process to make sure that they're aware that it's going to take some time to get everything accomplished. Foreclosures don't have that same turnaround time, right? If it's foreclosed, they already own it, they're ready to make a decision. It's already assigned to a portfolio manager. So yeah.
What resources are, for real estate agents who are thinking about this, because we're going to talk about the other portion that you said that you can talk about your pulse on the market now and where it's going, but you just started to get into it a little bit about foreclosures and short sales. So what education or opportunities to educate the real estate agent would you direct them to now to learn more other than this just brief overview today? What would, or even your team members, like, what do you put them to? What podcasts, what reading, what books to do more, to understand it more?
I would probably just, I would focus on the opportunities that are available to you. And that right now is going to be the short sale market. That comes first before a foreclosure. In terms of locking in and connecting, I think you just need to be aware of the market trends, be aware of where the market's going and how it's going. You can look at that by seeing that there's more properties on the market this month than there was 2 months ago. You can look at it that the interest rates are taking another increase today that is going to have a huge impact on people who are paying $5 a gallon for gas, and they have an interest rate that may be an adjustable rate that just went up to 6% or 5.5%. So there's so much happening there that you need to look at how you're impacted. So if you're seeing everything around you go up, there's an affordability. You don't realize how many households are going paycheck to paycheck. You don't realize that if gases are $5.75 a gallon or $6 a gallon, that you're actually taking food away from people because they can't afford to get to work. So eventually what's going to end up happening is they're going to end up not making their mortgage payments. And it's going to put them in a really tough situation. And you're going to be able, as a real estate agent, to go there and help them facilitate a sale that might get them money in this market. back in 07, 08, we were selling short sales. There was no money to be had for any of these people, right? Because they bought their house 3 years before. You know, like I joke about it. We're here in Fall River, right? Back in the day, I would be looking at it, I'm like, oh my God, somebody actually bought this 3-family for $450,000. Well, back in 07, 08, we were listing those houses for 2.25 because there was a financial crash. The banks were giving everybody mortgages. Well, that's not happening right now. Banks aren't just giving everybody mortgages. They've been conservative. Yeah, they've skirted a little bit over the last couple of years, but the reality is, just think about that first-time home buyer that put 3.5% down, okay? And maybe their 3.5% down was $5,000, but they only had $7,000 in their savings account. They're a hot water tank away from not being able to have any savings or any reserve to be able to make their mortgage payments. So there really isn't anything to listen to or watch or pay attention to, other than just be aware of your surroundings and what the market looks like, because there's a lot of people in that situation. And we in Massachusetts and Rhode Island are going to be the last to recover, but the first ones hit. So I've been telling my support staff and my team to be ready for an increase because it's inevitable. The government threw money at problems for the last 2 years. You didn't have to make your mortgage payment. You could literally call up your bank and say, hi, I'm not making my mortgage payment because I was impacted by COVID. And they couldn't even ask you any questions. Okay, no problem. We'll put you on a deferment plan. Have a nice day. And then you drive by these people's houses and they've got brand new Range Rovers in their driveway. And they haven't made their mortgage payments in 6 months, right? And it's crazy to say because my team does BPOs and inspections for banks before they go to foreclosure. And when we, I know because I'm connected to these clients, is they're like, well, these people haven't made a mortgage payment in 10 months. Well, they got a brand new Range Rover in their driveway. Well, because they didn't have to make their mortgage payments last year, they got used to it. So that is a cycle that we're not going to see probably for another year. But that COVID crisis is gonna impact the market. What's going to impact us next, I think, is going to be more foreclosures, not a surge, but more foreclosures that are going to sell for more money than they would generally sell for a year from now.
So now this is where I wish that, and I was just trying to scroll through quickly to see if he was on here, but I don't see Jason Linscott on here. But with the adjustable rates and the lenders and the relationships, if you wanted to get creative with regards to being ahead of that, you already have this special niche. You've been doing it for this long. You have the relationships. I mean, geez, you were like acting mayor and you own a restaurant diner like on the corner where you have to get into Fall River. So if you don't have all of those things for the typical real estate agent, would a lender be, and this is a personal question, I'm just throwing it out there, would a lender know their portfolio of people of whose rates and adjustable rates are going to jump? That maybe if you had a relationship with Jason, who I wish was on here right now, that they could say, yeah, we do know these people's rates. We get a email, we get a ding that they're going to go up to this. And then maybe look at their houses. Do they have oil? That's a big one too. If they service oil, the oil industry, that's going to be out of control to heat their houses next year. And because of the inflation and what Cliff's saying between the gas and the food cost and things like that, people just financially aren't going to be afford. They're going to have to cut and paste wherever they can. So food is necessary, water is necessary, roof over your head, but it's hard to get people out. So I'll stay there as long as I can. So what kind of marketing material, letters, or anything do you and your team send to people to educate them, maybe before this happens, to be a resource in case they wanted to pick up that marketing piece or letter to be like, maybe Cliff could educate me on this environment, on this topic?
Well, so I've always been a believer in the agents that are in my office. When I do my trainings, I tell them this: I don't believe in mail. I think mail is a waste of time. I think mail is a waste of money, and you're not going to do anything with mail. The only mail that is effective is mail that looks like this, that looks like you're getting invited to a wedding. I maintain this like you wouldn't believe, because I get mail, it's on my desk, it looks like this, and I throw it all out. I look and see if it's a bill or if it's a check, and then I throw everything out. So to the retail agents out there, which is pretty much everybody here, don't send mail to anybody. It's not going to be opened. Okay. So what I would do if I were you is I would pick up the phone or knock on their door. I have 2 agents in my office who I don't want to necessarily say I challenge, they challenge themselves. They're one of our top producers. They've teamed up together and they've been knocking on doors for the last 2 weeks. And every couple of days, I'm sending them a quick note saying how you make out. And they're actually started with absentees and then now doing some other things. So they're doing a fantastic job, but they're making appointments. Nothing is ever going to be able to beat that belly-to-belly treatment or that phone call. So marketing material, I don't use. The only marketing material I use is I bring a listing presentation package to the house with me if I'm going to list their property. Okay. But I am not sending them a flyer or, hey, dear homeowner, throw all that stuff up.
So you're making a phone call, Cliff, right? So you're making a phone call and for you, and what does that sound like, or a team member? What does it sound like right now?
So it's hey Ray, this is Cliff Ponce with Keller Williams. I'm reaching out to you today because I'm doing some prospecting in the area and I noticed that houses are selling like crazy in your end of the woods. Just curious, are you interested in selling? That is a conversation you can have today with a short sale buyer because they don't realize that they have equity in their home. 3 years from now, or 2 years from now, or a year from now, they might not have equity in their home. In 08, 09, it was, hi Ray, this is Cliff with, I was at Century 21 at the time. Hey Cliff, hey Ray, this is Cliff with Century 21. Just curious, are you interested in selling your house? The bank's going to take it, right? So that isn't a conversation that you need to have today. You can say, hi Ray, this is Cliff. I'm just curious, I'm doing some prospecting in the area. I stumbled across your property, drove by, it's in great shape. Are you interested in selling? And you know that the lender's already knocking at their door, but they don't know you know. So
and that's because you've gone on to those websites that we talked about earlier on, and you're targeting softly these doors to have that conversation, leave your business card, things like that, and recircle back around in a month and say, I know we had this conversation. Are you interested today?
Right, correct.
Okay.
It's a much easier conversation than we were having 10 years ago, that's for sure.
All right, is there anybody that's on Zoom currently that has any question that wants to unmute themselves to ask Cliff any of those questions? Anybody in here have any specific questions? All right, Cliff, go ahead.
Just a side note, if there is anybody, and maybe this is a conversation that you and I could have, but you know, my team is certainly looking to, we have an expansion team in the Plainville, Sharon area. I would love to partner up with some folks down in your market center who might be hungry and ready to learn and take buyer leads from our foreclosures. So if you have any good people in mind, we're certainly, my director of operations is Scott is on this call too. Would be happy to have a conversation with your office about getting a little foreclosure team out there under my direction with my contact. Certainly something we could talk about down the road. So
I absolutely love that. Jameson, if you don't mind sending me an email with Scott's information. After our meeting today, we do send out this recording so that others can watch it with a little bit of information underneath the email. One of those will be the contact information for the team member, Scott, to go through the recruit select process for individuals that might be interested. But I just want to thank you again, Cliff, for taking time today. I think it's a really important conversation. We are going to be talking about the shift series that's happening with the region. And if you're not ahead of this, like he said, these are the houses that are going to be the ones moving. So I appreciate your time today, Cliff.
I think Michelle has a question. Michelle, you have a question?
Sure. Oh, let me see.
I do. Real Cliff, when there's an REO offer that we upload online and it has a deadline, what is the normal lead time when you hear back if they don't, I've seen some where they disclose like they'll get back to you within the next days, but this particular one I just did doesn't have a deadline. Any insight to that at all?
Yeah. So when you submit an offer to a bank, they don't care about your deadline.
Exactly. That's kind of what I was afraid of, and the clients do still care, but
yeah. So some advice on that. Let them know that you can put it in the offer, but they don't care. They're going to get to it when they have a chance. So I would suggest that you just educate your buyers and say, this could take a week. And if it comes in 4 days, you over deliver.
Got it. Okay, thanks for your help. This was very helpful.
Great.
Excellent. All right. So thank you, Cliff. For those of you who would like to stay on, we do have Mitchell Weissman, our real estate attorney here. And like we talked at the last shareholder meeting, besides short sales and REO foreclosure, things like that, divorce is happening, unfortunately. And during COVID, a lot of things happened. And so, we got into a good conversation last month. Mitchell took the opportunity to bring in Justin Banks, who is part of his firm, to discuss some of the things that you should be aware of when working with people going through the divorce process. So I am going to switch this over to Mitchell first for real estate purposes, and then he will introduce Justin and we'll go from there. So if you'd like to stay on, then please do so, even if you're not within our market center. And Cliff, thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. Have a great day.
Thanks. All right, I'm just readjusting for our two guests so that they can sit and we can do a little Q&A appropriately. Perfect, thank you, Mitchell.
All right, you guys all know me. I brought with me one of our real estate. He's a real estate guru, but he's more a family law guru, Justin Banks. There are steps that need to be taken when a property is coming out of a divorce. There are questions that need to be asked before you take a listing for people that are being divorced. And so we thought it would be helpful, Jamie thought it would be helpful, and we'd be glad to do it, is to bring in one of our folks who can talk to you in a more educated fashion than me about what you need to do in anticipation of a property coming out of a divorce, as well as what can be impediments along the way as you're like if you have buyers and you're buying from a property that is owned by people getting divorced, there are things that get in the way. So
But this is a good dynamic duo because everyone stays in their lane we talk about.
we try very hard.
In the real estate language, Mitchell will speak, and when we talk about the divorce and some of the stuff, and if you haven't gone through divorce, that's awesome. But if you have, you understand that some of them, that's awesome too. I mean, that was Mark McKay. So I just think from the divorce point of view, Justin can give some brief information about how that works, more so from like listing the property, when one of the divorcees need to purchase a property, things like that. And then I feel like it's great contract wise for real estate. Mitchell can jump in. So the dynamic duo, I think it's a great one today.
And last thing I was going to say, just like we had Carl here, the previous meeting talking about the state property coming out of the state, things that you need to know in advance. Same thing with family law, primarily divorce. So without further ado, I'll turn this over to my friend Justin, and he will teach you everything you need to know about family law.
Good morning to all of you. Within the confines of this conversation, it's a very important place to start. If you're ever dealing with either on the buyer side or the seller side a piece of property that is involved in a divorce, your first question is, where are they at in that process? Because what a lot of people in this state don't know is that from the second that a complaint for divorce is filed, there is an automatic restraining order on the movement of assets. It's called Supplemental Probate and Family Court Rule 411. So oftentimes even the parties, if they're not getting quality advice, don't know that they can't be selling or moving their property during the pendency of that matter. So I've been in situations where I've had somebody on one side or the other of the case, I get a call from a realtor, a mortgage broker, whoever it may be, but they're trying to start that process now without having gone through the proper channels of either getting the agreement of the other side or a court order from the party, or a court order giving them permission to sell or sometimes even buy a new property. So somebody may have left their house, they want to buy something new, but when you're talking about putting down $50, $100, $150,000 on a property, that's movement of assets in a way that we can't do without everybody's agreement or a court order. It has unintentionally put some realtors in a bind where they are dealing with a person and they're getting information from them. And they get everything up to, they're about to sign a PNS, and then they call me and then I go, wait, hold on, you can't do that. And they thought they were gonna do it tomorrow, and I'm like, oh no, I gotta get some time, I have to call this person, I have to do that, I may have to file a motion. So for you guys, it's really important that when you're starting, you wanna know, have you started, are you in the middle, is it over? If it's over, you're fine, you're good, you can do whatever you want, but if you're in the middle of it, you really need to be getting more information from the people to make sure that they actually can move that property.
Now, that's only if they filed. Let's say that there's a couple that's separating and they are going through the separation process of a separation agreement
Yep.
that has not been filed yet. And the two of them are somewhat amicable-ish. And they're deciding to, like that word, and then they're deciding to potentially sell that property.
Yep.
And we're going down that path to sell it. And in the separation agreement, two attorneys are adding into the language that the sale property will, maybe the wife or the husband's gonna buy them out.
Yep.
So there's going to be consideration for that, and it enters into a separation agreement. How does that work before it's filed? Is it okay if
Yes,
all parties
so
are involved?
that is a actually very common occurrence. I'm doing it right now. I have a house in, I think it's North Andover. They're doing it.
It's not my house, everybody. I've already done this.
They're doing it, but they're doing the joint petition. So they're
Mhm.
doing a 1A, they have a separation agreement. But they were trying to do a buyout. They decided they couldn't. The market's great, so they're selling the house. But they're still working with counsel on it just because there are terms in the agreement of what are we gonna do with the money, who's gonna hold it, whatever it may be, but it's fine at the end of the day. Sometimes they'll use two different brokers. That's kind of a question that you all may want to think about is, are you okay working with two brokers? Oftentimes when people are getting divorced, they no longer want to be that financially attached to each other and they want to have somebody looking out for their own interest.
And they have two lawyers too, which
They
makes it
will.
really fun to do.
So then your communication gets tough.
Two brokers to represent them, because when they're mutually still married under state law and they're trying to quote buy each other out and negotiations are happening, it's one thing to have two attorneys maybe negotiate terms, but often you'll bring in two real estate agents, and that can be hired at different discrepancies, guys. That could be, I'm gonna give you 1% of the sale, I'm gonna give you 1% of the sale. It's not a traditional sign here at 5%. They're signing more of an agreement, a statement of conditions, something that's been drawn up to say this real estate agent will be paid X to negotiate terms and conditions on behalf of.
That's true. From our perspective, I always prefer to use one. So I already have a lawyer on the other side. I already have two adverse parties, even if they're getting along, they're adverse. It's like even the happiest of divorces, they're adverse parties. So it's always better if we can agree on one person where we have now pushed because I'm not a real estate broker, so I don't know. I understand what happens within the context of what I do, but somebody else actually has to do that legwork, and it is a lot smoother and oftentimes leads to a lot better results to have one person doing it. So if we can agree on one, we will. But every so often you can't. And one person wants their broker, we want ours, and then you have four professionals in the room dealing with something that oftentimes for you would probably just be one person and you, but it's me and my broker, opposing counsel and their broker, and then everything has to flow through all of us to the parties, back up to us, to you. It can get complicated. I will say in my professional experience, those situations generally happen on the way bigger deals. I'm selling we have an $8 million piece of commercial property that's being sold right now. And there are 3 lawyers on each side, a broker on each side, and the parties, but these people have a $40,000 mortgage on an $8 million piece of property. Everybody wants to be represented on the $7.6 million. Your average $800,000 house, we can figure out a mutual broker to use. But from your perspective, you should be prepared for the possibility of you get contacted by me and my client. We say we've agreed to sell the property. We want to use you. And then the other side comes in and goes, hold on, we want to use our broker too. But those situations they are a lot easier to deal with than the contentious ones. Because if people are agreeing what's going to happen with it, that's kind of just the minutia in between of how we actually get it done. Where there are real issues and problems is when we know a piece of property is being sold, but we don't know what's gonna happen. Because then we don't know how the money's gonna be split. We don't know what people want to do with it. I had a real estate broker who was acting as an escrow agent for me on a case that I just took to trial because the parties couldn't agree on anything. So it was her responsibility to list the house, sell the house, give the husband a right of first refusal on buying the wife out of the house with certain terms set by the court. That got really complicated, and then she had to sit on $400,000 for 6 months while we took the case to trial, and then also appeared as a witness at the trial. I felt really bad for her in that. She was very helpful to us, but the entire situation, I think it was more than she bargained for. She thought she was.
So let's take that one for example, right? What things, is it just the magic question right at the beginning that you came in hot with about where are we in this process that could have saved her all of this heartache and aggravation? Then I think if that's the one question you get out of today, then that's the one question.
Sometimes you're okay with it. Though.
Yeah.
Everything's cost benefit, right? So you're thinking about, you ask that question, it's like, okay, this is gonna get pretty messy, but for you on your end, it's like, well, how messy compared to what it could be worth to me? That one, she knew that she was holding the money in escrow. She's gonna get paid out of escrow. Nobody's gonna stiff her. And she had an idea of what the value on the house was. It ended up being a little bit lower than she wanted. But I think that ultimately it worked out. But yeah, you will save yourself, you will get a lot of perspective on where it might go. And you could save yourself a lot of headache if you ask that one question up front. Because if you get one of my cases when it's all wrapped up and done and you call me and I go, here, it's fine. Here's the 2 pages of the separation agreement that have to do with the sale of the house. Everything you need to know is in there. You can call me with any questions. 9.5 out of 10 times I'll never hear from you again.
Yeah.
I'll hear from my client thanking me, thank you for referring me to that person. It was great. I got the house, or we sold the house. I got my money, whatever it may be. But 9.5 out of 10 times you go and you're done and you have nothing to do with me.
Being in front of real estate agents, right, that need you during this process. What are some other pieces of advice, if you could scream it out in social media and everybody was reading it as a real estate agent, about things that would help your job easier that we should know in advance that potentially we don't know when dealing with either the buy side or the list side with divorce?
So for me, buy side, list side, doesn't matter. Either way, it's all the same to me because either we're buying or we're selling, but I'm just representing my client and I want their deal to get done. We can be tools for each other. It is never a bother for you if you're dealing with somebody like that. It is absolutely never a bother for you to call me. I've never looked at my phone and been like, oh God, why is this mortgage broker calling me? Why is this real estate broker calling me? Because where I have information that you need, you may have information that I need. We're going to share it freely. Where I do have issues is when I have somebody working on the back end and they're not sharing stuff with me, and then I have to call them to get information, and then we're in the, oh no, you shouldn't have done that. No, we need to do this, or my client really wants this to happen. Maybe whatever it may be, it's keep that line of communication open because it'll save us all a lot of time and heartache.
Okay. Yes.
Does it make a difference if you have 2 people that agree that they want that, they're like, all right, this is over, and we both agree we're gonna sell the house? And then, so there's conversation going already that direction, and all of a sudden, one of them says, I am so pissed off, I'm serving them for divorce papers now. Does that change everything, or is it still?
If you're not under agreement, yep.
Yeah.
If you're not under agreement, once they are served with that complaint, the house can no longer be sold unless it is by agreement. Then you get people who start arguing about the value of the house. They were okay with selling it, listing it at $890 in May. Then somebody stepped on somebody's toes when they were exchanging the kids in July. The house isn't under agreement. Now you thought that you were going to be listing the house at $890, but the guy thinks it's worth $1.2, and now they're going to spend a year and a half arguing over that.
And then they need a court order to sell.
Or an agreement. The agreement usually comes after time. People come down. If the parties
It's a written
agree,
agreement about that.
yes.
But one thing I want to just add is if you have a separation agreement and there are terms as to how the real estate is supposed to be handled, it doesn't mean they can just change their minds without going through the process and sell the property. In other words, if there is a separation agreement, that dictates how that property is being sold.
And you don't want, even if they tell you, oh no, it's fine, they agree, you want to see it in writing. Because I have personally dealt with situations where the parties agreed verbally, and then a year and a half later, somebody forgot about whatever that verbal agreement was, and I was back in court on a contempt. The real estate broker, you guys, was hung up now on a deal. The wife is in trouble because she relied on what my client said verbally, allegedly. And so it's really like, you're gonna wanna see a writing. I can give them to you. I have houses that get sold. I have houses that get refied all the time. And at the drop of a hat, I can give you all of the written information that you need for it. If they can't give you that, don't trust them.
Do you have like a workflow thing that would show, all right, so I know they're upset right now and they have nothing except for some verbal arguments and some verbal agreements that, yes, we're gonna have to sell the house and I'm gonna go to my mother's and you're gonna live with your girlfriend and so there they are, but they don't have, so, a workflow to say, all right, you need a written separation agreement in order to.
We can do stipulations in between. So that's what I was gonna get to next. So if we're in the middle of the case and you own your property and you guys wanna get out of it now, there are two things that we can do that kind of move the process along. Is we can do a stipulation. So we do a stipulation, which is like a mini agreement. We present it to the court. Now they can sell the house, and we will also dictate what we're gonna do with the money then. So if the net proceeds that they're gonna get after, now this is important for you guys as well, because you can get paid quicker. So if you have parties that are agreeing like that, and they'll stipulate all the time, I'll stick to the broker fees being paid and everything being paid right out of the proceeds, then the rest of the money gets held in escrow, because I don't need to hold you up. If you got the house sold first, you got the money in escrow, now my job's easier, I don't have to value.
Now, does that go on any terms and conditions, or is there a certain form that would say that? Let's just say that unfortunately, they haven't picked you as the real estate agent and they picked somebody else who is not as driven and forefront as that. What should they ask for or look for asking from an attorney to say, listen, I know this is going to be a situation. I still want my broker fee now versus in that 6-7 months of nonsense.
Yeah.
How do we make that happen? What is that form
It
called?
would be in the stipulation. So in the stipulation, in the temporary order, it'll dictate that the parties have agreed for the house, for the property located at blank address to be sold. All brokers fees and commissions shall be paid out of the proceeds. Thereafter, the net proceeds shall be held in escrow with either me or the other lawyer. Sometimes the broker will hold it, whoever it may be. But you there have it in a court order that you're to be paid out of those funds. And then it also gives you the ability where, when the funds are being held in escrow, you have the ability to go back and get them out of there. But that's how we handle it in the middle of the case.
And I think this goes back to Mitchell, and maybe you can answer it, Justin, too. But, we talked about we're starting to get a little bit lazy because we're moving so fast in the industry because it was such a hot market for 2 months, and you're getting 1 signature versus 2 on an exclusive listing agreement. And this is a perfect reason
Never do
that just came up last week with one of our agents who is now hemming and hawing because the quote husband didn't agree, but now we have it kind of under agreement and we're going towards purchase and sale. And so this is a really big reason. It's a big reason on why the deed, like Mitchell said last week, so this is all stuff, not last week, last month, that he was talking about on slowing down in the process and making sure that you're presenting offers that are fully and protecting the client, making sure that you have both of those names, especially when it comes to the deed. And if it's not their names and it's a LLC, or if it's an estate, making sure you have all these questions.
Right, as we've talked about, this process should begin even before you have your listing appointment. You need to the extent that you can, you pull the deed for the property, you find out who owns it. Because, one second, it's always amazing to me how folks don't know that, for example, they put the property in trust, or it's property coming out of an estate. They don't know that because somebody still lives in the house, that they can sell it. You're going to get contacted a lot by people who are, for example, the surviving child, and they're going to say, I want to sell my mom's house. That may be fine, but it may not be fine. You've got to find out.
It
and-
starts with the list, guys, it starts with you.
Right.
Your questionnaire
what I'm
needs to
trying
be
to say
so
is-
detailed
Right,
that you're
you-
asking the right questions.
Because if you are lazy about it and just go there and let them tell you the facts, you're gonna find a lot of situations where you have an unenforceable.
There are no facts, verbal facts.
Right.
Every fact is a proven written fact, Justin. It's all in writing.
They are, and to follow up on what he said, I have just very recently had two parties that owned a house in an LLC. And the wife was living in the house and decided she wanted to sell it. And she signed a listing agreement, her lawyer sent us a listing agreement, and I quite literally laughed at it, and I said, that's funny, she doesn't own the house. Right, she doesn't own the house, not a member on the LLC, can't make.
There's no
decisions for the
Not
LLC.
even a member. of
She
the
signed it,
LLC.
she wasn't, she has, so when you're
Oh,
talking
that
in
poor
my
buyer.
context, you have an equitable interest in everything. So she did have a 50% equitable interest in the property. She can't move it legally. So she signed that agreement.
So let's just, it's not that, I just want to chunk this terminology down.
Yes.
Okay? An equitable share in the property, okay, with LLCs. Just please explain that so that people understand
Again,
that with equitable share stake, you have no what?
you have no legal rights. to it.
Nothing.
What
Zero.
you have is that in this state, if you're married, whatever, depending on certain facts within your marriage, you have an equitable interest to anything that the other person owns. But that does not mean that you own
That is defined.
it. It is.
That is defined though. So if you're talking about a restaurant, you're talking about something like that, and you're an equitable share stakeholder, you're not making decisions about hiring, where we're spending the money, X, Y, Z, but when there's profitability to be had, you're receiving 50% of the quote, husband, ex-husband's 50%.
Exactly.
All right, Jen's first.
So, this is the first I have to do it next week. So there's, I looked at the deed, it's only the wife on the deed, right? But they've been married a long time. When they go to sell it, they're both gonna sign the deed, right? You're gonna
No.
have Mr. Roy
Well,
sign the deed. 'Cause I've had
From
them
from
go down and say,
ownership perspective, only she needs to sign it. He needs to sign it because he probably has homestead rights.
Okay,
So they both need to sign it, but the owner, and from a listing and a deed perspective, is just the missus.
so don't get him to sign them, and he's willing to sign the listing agreement.
Not necessary.
Not
But
necessary,
he,
but.
not, I mean, you can do, more is always better than less.
If he will, do it.
Yeah.
Right.
Because it won't jam you up later if he says anything about whatever they were
He
doing.
was unaware that they have several properties. He was kind of unaware that he wasn't on that one. He's like, oh, no. big deal."
Yeah, but he does have to sign the deed to release his, to release
Isn't it
his.
funny, people want to be aware during a divorce, but when you're going into properties and going into investments, you're just oblivious.
Oh, they don't care, because we bought it
Dollars and
together.
cents,
He was
people.
trying to protect himself, way back
Yeah.
from.
Well, because you, from his perspective, he's protected anyway.
Right.
So like for us, I tell people all the time, they're like, well, I'm not on the deed. And I go, it doesn't matter. It matters for our perspective here. It doesn't matter for them. You're gonna get your share. It's there. We know that you own it. He's gonna get his.
Yeah.
Your question is, what do you need to do to make sure that your
Is
deal
it,
and your.
it's okay with.
Yes. So if you don't need him on it, but if you have him on it, it'd be really tough for him to ever go.
On board with the price.
Ron, do you have a question? Go ahead.
Not sure how to properly phrase it, getting a little confused on the comments regarding how the money will be held in escrow and then based on how it's written, then distributed to the broker that doing their job later on down the road. I don't know if I heard that right.
That happened.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get a listing contract signed. That stipulates how money's gonna be distributed at closing, and we get paid out of escrow and all that stuff is happening at closing. So how does this conversation about the separation agreement or whatever discussion you mentioned conflicts with a listing agreement signed, in good faith by two adults who have the authority to sign a listing agreement that give us the authority to get paid right to closing?
There's two ways that can happen. One way is a court basically says, I don't care about,
About the listing?
Yeah.
Okay.
For right now,
for right now.
because they're fighting about the money. And so since they're like, no one's taking any money, no one's getting paid, like hold that money. That can happen. You'll get your money later when it all shakes out, but your terms and conditions in your listing contract.
What can I do? Can I file a complaint against the court, or to the court that I'm not waiting like a year, like make a decision on that?
You
could-
you could.
Hey, Judge.
What would happen?
You
No, I'm being
could-
serious,
What would happen, and
because
also,
we're the ones on the shit end of the stick.
You are.
we're doing the work, we deserve to get paid.
But
You
what
wanna
did he
fight is
say?
not my
But
issue.
listen, but what did he
Okay.
say at the beginning?
That's
That
why,
we're-
this is why I say, when
I
you get into that, you know that that's a possibility, so you
I wanna
want to,
protect our agents. make
you
sure we
want to
get
be
paid.
clear that you have language from them within their case, that you're gonna get paid as soon as you're done.
Well, first, Justin said, they asked the question. He came in right at the beginning and said, you asked, where are you in the process?
Yes,
Then the second question is, when you know that there's an attorney involved, let's just say it's Justin, then it's the real estate agent's job, which they don't know yet, that's why Justin's here, to ask the question to a Justin and say, can you make sure that I'm protected, that if this turns into a shit show and the courts and we have to hold all this money, can I at least get my commission and get that agreed upon with the other attorney and people and the sellers involved? Yes, I'll make sure that if that should go left, that we will try our hardest to negotiate to get that paid out to you.
you're
That's
also,
just-
in that situation, that only happens while the case is happening. If there's a
Right.
separation agreement and it's done, you're fine. It's when we're in the middle. And if you ask me the questions and you're communicating with me, very easy for me to file a motion with the court saying the house is being sold, the broker needs to be paid out of this. And the court's really gonna look at it and be like, yeah, the broker should be paid and move on. It's where we get too deep in the process and then we start asking for things that they go, let's hold on, and then we can flesh everything out and then pay people out when we're done. So the more you ask up front, the more we're prepared for it, is really the point.
Well, the one thing I'm learning today, just real quickly, is every time I do a pre-listing call, I always ask about foreclosure and I'm current with our payments. I might need to add in, I'm just curious, is there any issue with potential divorce happening? Is there an issue with that? And it's a touchy topic, of course, but, you know, there could be husbands and wives that aren't telling us the facts up front. And we're not as pushed, oh, are you guys getting divorced? Like, you know, it's a hard discussion, but they, behind the scenes, they could actually be filing some divorce paper. We don't know it. That's
Yeah,
what
we've
we're
seen
seeing.
that before where, you know, they don't want to show their card. So they don't tell you because people think, oh, they're getting divorced, they're gonna take a low number,
Right.
right, yeah.
It is,
So we
and
gotta
it's,
put all that.
it's a question for you to ask, it's good information for you to have, because it can have an effect on.
Yeah, because
And
you,
it-
like you said, you're 3 months down the road and you've got a deal in place and now they filed some type of thing and that, you know, causes like a stop on the P&S being signed or whatever. And it's like, wait a minute, you didn't tell me this at the beginning.
But on the pre-listing call, in my opinion, it really shouldn't be that awkward if you're setting the stage for the potential call and say, I'm gonna take some notes. I have a series of questions that are important with regards to how we move this. I need you to be as honest as possible. We're gonna go through about 20 questions so that I can represent you properly.
Right.
I think if you pose it that way, it probably would soften somebody that's a mess. It's like, well, I might be going through a divorce. Otherwise, I probably would bring that right back up when you're signing the paperwork, bring out that questionnaire sheet and say, okay, we talked about 25 questions and we're just gonna review. So this is just one more time, there's no short sale, foreclosure, XYZ, ABC, divorce, blah, blah, blah. Great.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's just on presentation.
It's also, from in the 10 years that I've been dealing with this, I have yet to meet a client that had any idea that that was as relevant as it is for them. So you might be thinking, you're thinking, oh, it's awkward to ask them, and they're thinking, well, I haven't filed yet, it doesn't matter, I'm gonna do this, I might file in 3 months.
Right, the reason they're selling the house maybe because
Yeah.
they're on their way out.
But
And
they don't know.
Yeah, that husband or wife
They
could
don't
have the
know
other
how-
one not home and they're like, I just want to get a good guesstimate other than Zillow because I'm about to have a conversation at dinner on Friday night, drop the ball and say we're out. And I want to know how much the house is worth. That happens all the time.
Sure.
So, yeah.
all right, Frank,
This is kind of a follow-up to what Ron brought up. You have a couple, they're getting divorced, but they haven't filed the agreement yet.
Mhm.
Agreement's not in place. You had mentioned earlier that they can have their own broker.
Yep.
Each have their own broker or agent. So my question is, one of the partners comes up and they talk to an agent and they say, I want you to represent me. And they give an exclusive right to sell. And they put, and of course, the broker will look at the deed, see there's 2 names on it, and the agreement on the exclusive right to sell has both names. The other spouse goes to their broker and says, I want to sell. the broker comes up with an exclusive right to sell, and both names have to be on it because that's what's on the deed. Am I missing a conflict there? How does that, because you have two exclusive rights to sell with two different agents.
You now say, let me know when you have it worked out. Because that, you are not gonna wanna get involved in their dispute about one realtor, two realtors, seven realtors. So you'll say to them, because if they're at that stage and they're not even talking enough to be able to, that they're all getting their own realtors, and the other person goes, no, they have lawyers.
Okay,
Say to them,
Yeah.
let us know when this gets worked out, and then
Your realistic resolution to that is you do what Mitchell said. I talked to the lawyer on the other side. We yell at each other for 5 minutes saying that neither listing is actually exclusive and that we agree to use both and tell you guys that you can split the fee.
okay, but you'll still have two agreements with the same names on them, but
you're ultimately going to have one
One.
agreement with,
And it won't matter because what he's saying is, okay, it kind of goes to with Ron. They, in their, an attorney trumps you. Like, who are we?
right.
Like an
I
attorney
like that.
is
I like
here
that.
and we are here. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way, but when they're going through all that stuff, it's their
Well,
word,
because
their
what really
negotiations.
is the court's up here, then
And
we're
then
dealing
you,
with the
then
court,
us.
then you, then like
Then
the
the client.
people. So if I'm looking at your listing and it had both names on it, but only one of them signed it because you only need one signature, I go, okay, well, you can't contract for my person, they're going through a divorce.
So at what point can they sign, and do they have to have the
Both of
agreement?
them can.
And both of them can
They
sign it?
both signed with you.
They both sign it, but it's not, even though it says exclusive right to sell, it's not.
No, if they both signed with you and both names are on it and it's with you, then it's yours. And then if somebody tries to go get somebody else, if I have the other person, I'm looking at them and being like.
I have two.
the truth of the matter is one of them are interested in another realtor, they're
Right.
not gonna sign
Right.
yours.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna jump in, Frank. There are other types of listing agreements that might take place here if two brokers are gonna be involved.
So that's the way
Same property.
we use a different agreement.
Correct. The exclusive right to list is a different form than the exclusive agency to list. There's different forms that might, I'm not.
And you
I
can
don't
have a
study this.
you can have a co-listing agreement with
Right,
another
you can do that
brokerage,
too.
and that's another separate little agreement. that
Listen,
we
you
would
can have a
with the
made up
brokerage.
agreement that's not even called an exclusive listing agreement, and you call it Mitchell, and you're like, listen, I need you to create
Yeah.
an addendum A or whatever terminology, since I didn't go to law school yet, right?
Right.
That
Next
just
week.
says, next week, that says something in terms of I'm representing this clientele to do this and that at 1%, blah, 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 blah. And if that happens, then you can do some representation that way. It doesn't have to be all the terms and conditions, by the way, of an exclusive listing agreement that goes under traditional umbrella of residential.
Correct.
And I would just say,
properties.
Frank, one last thing, not to interrupt. Any form, like in this unique situation, should be okayed by our broker of
Sure.
record and maybe Jamie and all that kind of stuff.
And guys,
So you
we
need-
probably have not spent more time on this topic than the number of times
Right.
you're going to see it.
Exactly.
I mean, I can tell you, I've been doing this a while, and I have yet to have, Justin does divorce, I don't. But from a real estate perspective, I've never seen that. So I can tell you that we probably don't need to spend a lot of time on it. Yes,
All
Jim?
right,
All right, so I'm gonna go back to the very beginning, like, when you sit with a client first and they say, all right, I want to talk to you, things are not going well, we're gonna get divorced, I want to sell my house, what is the first thing I need to do? Like, I don't even know what divorce is, this may be a meatball story, but I had this conversation recently, and I said, well, she said she had a name for an attorney, and she called the attorney, and they wanted a $10,000 retainer for her to start the process.
100%.
She makes $20,000 as a hairdresser. She said. "How am I
20,000 a
ever
year?
gonna get divorced?"
Oh, then she went to the wrong one.
I mean,
You,
she-
like, the retainer should match the case, the
Yeah.
same way, like, you guys get paid on a percentage of what you bring in, so it's gonna match what you did and what you got for them. Like, if I had a client come in and they make 20 grand a year and the husband makes 30, I'm not gonna ask for a $10,000 retainer, that's a third of their total. Yeah. They don't have the money to do that, so she went to the wrong one.
And it could be a lawyer who
You're not-
wasn't interested. And
I'm seeing
Jen,
her tomorrow.
it could be a lawyer who's not interested in representing that person.
Okay.
It made it too costly for them to say yes.
You can go downtown and find people that'll see a case and they wanna be nice to you, and
Yeah.
they'll just price you up. But there's somebody out there.
But then when some people look at the asset of like you said, of like that $8 million, if the wife is or husband or whoever is crying, I don't have any money because it's all locked up and all this. And they're doing a proper analysis of like maybe what the potential of could be there. That would be up to them to take the case at first.
That,
Right, with-
that happens. I
and
got
'cause
it,
you know
yeah.
on the
I had a
other
case in
end, it's
Wellesley right now
payday.
Where the mom makes zero. She was a
Right.
stay-at-home mom for 15 years, but the house is worth 1.8.
So we know we're gonna get
I
paid.
know I'm gonna get paid. It's for us, it's a matter of when,
Payday.
but I'm like, okay, I'll get paid. She's gonna get half of the house. There's no mortgage. I'm like, so I'll get paid at the end. I just know like I'm not getting paid now.
And one last point, and Justin can say this more than me, but I've noticed divorces generally are expensive. Okay, especially if people want to kill each other and want to fight to the death over, the chair in the living room, which happens, as you know, all the time. So people get sticker shock when they get answers like that, Jen. But if we're in a position, or any lawyer's in a position where they got to take something to trial, $10,000 is
Nothing.
nothing.
Not joke.
No, yeah.
If
But
you're
you wouldn't
doing
be
that,
able
so,
to do either, I mean, you'd be able to help with the separation.
oh,
Go
absolutely.
to a mediator.
Yeah.
I mean,
Absolutely, but if you're in that,
way
if you're in that position, it's not gonna be as expensive, but I mean, I don't know the facts
Yeah.
specifically to what she talked about, but you have to be very honest with your clients with valuing their case, where I could say, if I'm looking at your case right now, and there's nothing about, there's certain types of situations that people aren't gonna agree on, sometimes with kids, and then you're looking at them and have to explain to them, if you wanna keep going down this road, you could be looking at anywhere from $60,000 to $100,000 in legal fees alone.
all right,
So-
last question that I just thought of that talks about housing, right? So let's say a wife gets her real estate agent, I was gonna say BPO, compared a CMA.
Yep.
Property, according to that real estate agent, we put on the market today, it's worth 900. Other spouse member gets their own person, says it's 1.5. Now, as you representing the divorce, okay, how do you work with the other person? Do you guys bring in your own third party to evaluate it, to go ahead and put it on the market? Because that's what's been agreed upon. We just don't know what price or no.
Usually before that happens, we agree on how we're gonna set the price.
Okay,
So, like, to not jam you up.
yeah, yeah,
Because that would be, honestly,
Yeah.
I have people that could argue over $10,000 on the listing
Yeah.
price, let alone accepting the highest offer. So we have language in there that
And I argue about $10.
they will.
but many times in a divorce, you already work with real estate agents. This is why I say build relationships with divorce attorneys, because they're gonna need, sometimes if the divorcee people don't have anybody, because they're thinking about separation of kids and other important things, they'll ask 1, 2, or 3, they'll get whichever is the best and most fair, and then they suggest that person.
We are also a small group of attorneys within the state. So there is a finite number of us that work together all the time. So if I have Kristen Dobrell at Beryl Dana on a case downtown and we're putting a house up for sale, and I was working with you and I said, we'll just use my guy, he's great, I trust him. And she's like, okay, you're good now, we all trust each other. But then we put language in there where it's not gonna be John and Jane who are setting the price, because if you wanted to list it at 910,
Mhm.
he wants 905, she wants 915, we could be going around and around in circles. So we say, agreed upon broker sets the listing price, parties have to accept the best offer as determined by the broker.
Because you have to realize, we don't
Excellent.
set the price as an appraised value. It's a strategy market price.
I know.
Well, okay,
Last
so,
thing I wanted to say.
And that's why we can't, but for you guys, that's why we don't want to put you in a position where you're arguing with my client on how you're gonna set the price, because you're billing a function of trying to sell the house for the most value it is, not have a number on a listing that's as high as it is.
like Mitchell's coined terminology was stay in your lane,
Pretty much,
Stay in your
I
lane.
don't tell brokers what to set a listing price at, I ask them.
right?
What should we set the listing price? This is what you do. That's what you know. What are you gonna set it at so that you ultimately sell it for the most money possible? Because that's your lane, and I do not belong.
Just as a sales pitch for my firm, we have the largest family law department of any law firm in Boston suburbs. So,
East of Worcester.
so we are in a position to be helpful. And some people like men, we got men, some people like women, we got women, tall, short, we got everything. So,
Wide range of experience.
Right.
We also have,
And different departments too.
we have, the
It
firm
within-
itself has different departments, so we handle, like our family law department, we do not only divorce, but there's another place where we could interact is we do what's called special master work. So in some of those real difficult situations that I was talking about, judges get real tired of them and they make them really simple. They take one lawyer from my firm, appoint them as a special master, and now instead of you dealing with two lawyers and the parties, it's me and you. I'm the one that gets to
Big
choose
control,
everything.
special master,
Yes.
in one deal like that.
And it's,
cool.
I mean, it's beautiful for
Everyone
us
should do
because
it.
it's just like, it's like you're selling a property with
Right.
a single person. But it's there, that all that other stuff is going on, but now I got appointed, I've worked with you, I pull you in, and now it's like, okay, you're gonna set the, but then we talk, we're gonna set the listing price at this, we're gonna sell it at this.
It's like
You
your other
get,
client,
you get paid like, I am.
it's like your other client.
go ahead.
So, so we, again, today we weren't doing a traditional meeting. Like I mentioned to all of you, we were having a special guest on something that everyone thought was very important, obviously with the market. Thank you, Mitchell, for bringing Justin. And if you have any questions, their contact information will be in the email that goes out today. So if you have any questions specifically for here or for your clients, you should save it. The last thing that I just want to talk about to finish up, and then all the awards and accolades for last month and things like that will be on the shareholder slides. So congratulations to all of you that were first listing, first closing, #1 for units, volume for teams, groups, and individuals. You know, I push training because I used to be a school teacher and I feel like training is important. Once you stop learning, that's it. And that's a choice. And so in this market, you stop learning, you're not going to be here. That's just what it is. So I really believe that everybody should be on the Summer of Shift series that is launching in July. And there are Tuesdays 2 to 3. I suggest you put them in your calendar now. They start on the 19th. Each week is a new series on the tactics within the Shift book. If you don't have the Shift book, they're $12. Ask us for it. We'll put it on your bill. Get it from Amazon. It's $12. I would have that manual. There will be worksheets along with this. It's 1 hour, once a week. It's kind of like bold, but that's a full day. And all of these tactics that they're going to go through are going to help develop you in terms of the things that you need to be better on a shifting market, which we are in. So I'm just going to highlight that that's when it starts. If you have any questions, let us know. It's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 weeks, starts the 19th of July. It's Tuesdays 2 to 3. There's signs everywhere. You'll see text messages. It's on our app. Read your emails. It's there.
I
Yes.
was gonna say, the shift book techniques are awesome for all times, not
Yes, they
just
are.
the shift times. It's actually great stuff in there.
It is
that you
great
can utilize
stuff.
all the time.
Yes, agreed. So thank you for coming to our meeting today and thank you for our guest speakers and have a great week, guys.
Good job. Good job, team.